Adam Meyer, agronomist with Golden Harvest, covering northeast Iowa and southeast Minnesota. I'm here today in a cornfield where we're evaluating some root lodging caused by some wind. We had a lot of winds here this summer in varying areas across the geography, and in a lot of cases there was an underlying factor of why that corn went down, whether it be from some rootworm feeding, a compaction layer there with the root not able to penetrate and get a real nice foothold there to keep it upright during some of those wind events. And in the instance here, we're really trying to dive in and figure out why this corn went down. Ultimately, it did gooseneck back up and come back around to some degree, but there are definitely some issues that were showing up here that we can see here today. So just to begin with, when I did some digging, I identified that there was not a lot left of the root mass here in this field with this particular corn. And upon further investigation, this cornfield has been corn on corn for multiple years in a row now, without soil applied insecticide, solely relying on traits for the last couple of years as far as that rootworm protection goes. So over time, you can see we have built up some populations of the rootworms, and so we'll just talk a little bit about what that life cycle of the rootworm looks like. So we have adult beetles that lay their eggs in the soil, and then they will overwinter and they'll hatch, and then those larvae that emerge from that egg will start feeding on our root systems. So that generally occurs around that 700 GDU time frame, mid to early growing season there, and that's when we really start seeing some of the feeding taking place on our root system with the corn rootworms. From there, those larvae will turn into pupa and ultimately emerge as adults and cause some problems later on here. As you can see, some of the issues that that larval feeding can cause is, number one, standability. You can see some of these plants are also showing some moisture stress. So without much of a root system here, it's not able to take up as much water as we're demanding at this very critical time stage, at the R2 stage, where we're using a lot of water every day in trying to create yield. So we have a water potential issue with water uptake. We also have nutrient uptake issues, which we can show some issues, specifically nitrogen loss showing up and some deficiency as far as that goes. We know that nitrogen comes up with that water, so not being able to take up water, ultimately we're not able to take up the right amount of nitrogen along the way as well. So we'll start seeing some deficiencies come about here. And when we get later into the season, that plant we know wants to do as much as it can to produce as many seeds as it can, and therefore to meet those needs for nutrients, it will actually rob from the plant and ultimately the stalk later in the season. So we could see some late season stalk lodging issues in this type of situation as well. So that's something else to be mindful of. The other damage that we can see, towards that tassel time frame or a little bit after in that silking time frame, is silk feeding. And this can obviously cause issues for pollination and making sure that we have every kernel available for creating yield potential out there. If we have silks that are clipped within half an inch of the ear, we're not able to get that pollen from the tassels, that pollen shed to adhere to the silks and ultimately pollinate the ear and create the grain we're looking for. So that's a potential big issue and potential management that we need to take into consideration as well. I'd like to touch on the two variants of corn rootworms that we generally see in the Iowa and Minnesota geography, and those would be the northern corn rootworm, which are the generally yellowish to greenish looking adult beetles, and most of the time we'll find those in that rotated acre, the soybean ground that went to first year corn, and we see that northern population a lot more in that environment. And we actually have what's called a variant, the northern variant, that will lay eggs in corn this year. It will lay dormant through soybean crop the following year, and then it'll reemerge as larvae, and those eggs will hatch the following year when we go back to corn. So that's that northern variant, and we're starting to see some increasing populations with that variant as we go away from traits in some cases, and don't have as much treatment on some of those acres, and then just inherently we're seeing more populations of that northern come through in some cases as well. The other variant that we see in our geography would be called the western variant, and that western variant is mostly yellow with some black stripes down the back for the females, and all black for the males on the back. And those are the ones that we generally see more in that corn on corn environment, especially like the case we have here where we've been multiple year corn on corn without a lot of other management tactics being implemented to try to control some of the populations. So what are some of those management tactics that we can put into place to help prevent a situation like this, or if we're in a situation like this, to help things for the future with some of those populations? So number one would be around rotation. So as we go to that non-host crop such as soybeans, that allows us to break up the cycle with how corn rootworms, their life cycle, so then they will not be able to build up populations. Next year, if they hatch the eggs that are in the ground this year, they won't have a suitable host and will die out. So therefore, next time we go to corn, we should be in a much better situation. A second option, if rotation is really not in the cards for you on your farm, then we can do, we really like to have multiple modes of action as far as our rootworm traits go, and make sure we have effective control under the ground through traits. With our platform, the AgroSure Duracade trait stack is our preferred product of choice, in that it gives us the most effective mode of action on the market, also being the newest mode of action to the market. So a lot of these rootworms have not had this protein before, and resistance, there is no known resistance to that AgroSure Duracade trait as of today. So that trait durability is a very important thing, and then rotating traits up and introducing an AgroSure Duracade into your system would be a benefit for you. Another management option that we have in our toolbox is to apply a soil applied insecticide at planting time. This will give us effective control early season, especially when our roots are most vulnerable, and a lot of times if we have some feeding, our plants still may be small and that root mass may be pretty small yet. So the more feeding they do, the bigger that damage can be, especially earlier in the season. So that soil applied insecticide really gives us nice early season control of that below ground issue. One other management tactic that's available to us is to control the adult beetles in what's called a Beetle Bomb type of a situation, where we actually will spray insecticide over the top foliarly at an R2 or R3 type of a stage to try to kill those adult beetles before they lay eggs in the ground, so they won't hatch for the following years to come.